You've probably heard that the key to living a long, healthy life means eating something like a high-protein diet or the Mediterranean diet. But there's actually strong evidence that suggests there's a certain particular way of eating that beats them all. So in this video, I'm going to show you what that diet is, why it's so good for you, and how you can start incorporating it into your life. And that all starts with correcting one piece of information that everyone gets wrong. So when I was in college, I was on the fencing team, which is the sport where you see beekeepers running at each other every 4 years at the Olympics. But anyways, I remember my senior year, I really wanted to make the starting lineup because, senior year. So the summer leading up to that season, I was able to train at my college facilities. I signed up for private lessons with my coach. And so we would train and we would train and we would train. And I remember my coach came up to me after one lesson and said, "Your technique is good, but you're getting tired too easily. You need to be eating more protein." And there we have it. That was the first time I had heard the all too familiar, "You need more protein. It'll solve all your problems." And so with that, I headed to my local fresh grocer and started pounding more Greek yogurt, more egg whites, and more protein powder. And today, that advice has now reached the masses through platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels that push the message to millions of people that the more protein you eat, the better off you'll be. But the problem is, it's not based on science at all. And I get it, this goes against everything we've ever been told, but I've got receipts. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying protein is bad for you or anything. Experts agree, protein is important, but we're getting too much of it. And recently, some longevity experts have come out to say too much protein could actually shorten your lifespan. And that's because overconsumption of animal-based protein raises IGF-1 levels, a growth hormone linked to increased risk of chronic disease, accelerated aging, and reduced cellular repair. So why does it seem like everyone these days is trying to push so much protein? Is it just, a well-meaning, innocent mistake? No. You know why. Over the past decade, food companies have quadrupled the amount of high-protein products they sell worldwide. Not because people need more protein, but because it's a money maker. So this push for protein has made our food choices play out a lot like one of my favorite video games growing up, Kingdom Hearts. You see, at the start of the game, you're presented with 3 items: a sword, a shield, and a staff. Choosing the sword will give you stronger attacks throughout the game, and the shield will give you better defense, and the staff will give you better magic. The thing is, you also have to choose one to sacrifice, which means you'll be a little worse in one of those areas too. So it's a trade-off. And that's exactly what starts to happen when we start to choose more protein-heavy foods like cottage cheese, yogurts, and egg whites. These foods are all high in protein, but they have 0 grams in an extremely important nutrient that 95% of Americans are deficient in. And that's fiber. And more importantly, fiber is the closest thing we have to a true superfood or super nutrients that's part of so many different foods. Eating a fiber-rich diet is associated with better gastrointestinal health and a reduced risk of heart attacks, strokes, high cholesterol, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and even some cancers. So rather than increasing your protein intake, you might be better off lowering it, but more importantly, by making smart swaps to nutrient-dense fiber sources. But how do you do that? Well, let me start by saying, eating more fruits and vegetables is the tried and true soundbite, but if that's what you try to do, you're still gonna fail miserably in hitting your fiber goals. Why? Because the fact of the matter is, fruits and vegetables are some of the worst ways to get more fiber. Don't get me wrong, they're full of good, healthy stuff, but fiber is not where they shine. For example, in this day where I ate 80 grams of fiber, only 9 grams of fiber came from fruits and vegetables. So where do the other 71 grams of fiber come from? We can find the answer in these areas called the blue zones. The blue zones are 5 areas in the world that have been identified for having the highest concentration of people living to be 100 or more. And when they studied them, they found that they had a lot of things in common, like how active they were, their sense of community. But another striking thing they found is that the overwhelming majority of their calories came from whole plant-based foods like legumes, grains, nuts, seeds, and sweet potatoes. So much so that the researchers recommend you should be getting 95% of your calories from whole plant foods, basically almost an entirely vegan diet to replicate their diets. But the key here is that these people are not eating vegan junk food. They aren't downing Oreos, French fries, and Impossible burgers. They're consuming mostly foods in their whole forms that, again, are full of fiber and plant protein. And the plant protein part is another piece of the puzzle. For example, Researchers at the Harvard School of Public Health looked at 30 years of data across over 200,000 men and women and found that higher ratio of plant protein to animal protein may improve heart health. And remember that Harvard article from earlier that was saying too much protein is bad for you? Turns out they were only referring to animal protein because one of the Harvard professors they interviewed said, while there's no definite link between overall protein intake and risk of death, greater intake of animal protein is associated with a higher risk of death, and plant protein is associated with a lower risk. So it's not just about fiber, but it's also about plant protein. So it's no surprise that the foods that provide both of these nutrients are eaten in abundance in the blue zones, and these are your legumes and whole grains, and to a lesser extent, nuts and seeds. I know for a fact that most of my friends in the US barely eat any legumes ever, and they also nearly never touch whole grains. It's really just not part of our culture. Like, people don't even know what chickpeas are. Versus when I lived in Italy, chickpea is one of the first words I learned, and I didn't know any vegans. Cecchi. In the US, legumes and whole grains are just a massively forgotten about food group. But we do eat fruits and vegetables. Not as much, but we do eat them, okay? But let me show you why that's not enough. Let's take a look at a bowl of oatmeal. If you use 1 serving of oats, that's 8 grams of fiber. Top it with some blueberries, and that's only 2 grams of fiber. The oats are nearly 4 times the amount of fiber. Or let's look at a medium carrot versus half a cup of beans. The carrot has 3.1 grams of fiber, while the beans have nearly 13 grams. There's just no comparison. You simply just can't hit the fiber you need without whole grains and legumes. So that's why basing your meals around these foods is key. But how do you do that? Well, it starts at the grocery store. These are the cheapest foods in the supermarket. And when you go, you should be filling up your shopping cart with them, especially canned beans. And besides canned beans, most high fiber foods are sold dry, so they last ages and you don't have to worry about them going bad. So stock up so you'll always have these foods ready to go at home when it's time to prepare meals. Putting them together to different meals can be incredibly simple. For example, rice and beans. Now you might think that sounds boring, but I got you. There's so many variations of this simple recipe that you find across different cultures. Mujadara, gallo pinto, pilav with chickpeas, gallo pinto. Or another example, rather than a breakfast of scrambled eggs, you can swap that out for an oatmeal, which, if prepared right, could have even more protein than eggs. In this video, I prepared an oatmeal that ended up having 29 grams of protein, which was 60% more than eggs. So oats, along with many other whole grains, make a perfect breakfast option. Now, getting enough of these types of whole plant foods should be a daily habit you should strive to get to. Eventually. Because you might hear a lot of fiber and think, that doesn't work for you because in the past you've had a lot of fiber and had disastrous results. Well, there's a way around that, but it does take some time. You see, I'm part Mexican, and when I'm in Mexico, it's very common for people to eat beans every day. And there, people really have no problem consuming the amount of beans that would make people in the US reach for painkillers. So why is that? Are they just built different? Well, no. The thing is, we have a certain type of bacteria in our gut that gets fed when we give it high fiber foods like beans. So in places like Mexico, where people are constantly eating beans, the bacteria gets fed, and so there's always a very stable population of that bacteria in the gut. The more you feed them, the more there are. But in countries like our beloved US, our stomachs are deserts for that bacteria. So if you try to eat as much fiber as a Mexican in Mexico, you would regret that decision within an hour. The good news is you can build your way up adding fiber to your diet slowly. And this isn't just theory. We have studies showing that after a few weeks of increased bean consumption, your body gets used to it. So do you need to eat this way 100% to get the benefits? Luckily, there are plenty of studies out there that answer that question. Firstly, research found that for every 20 grams increase of daily legume intake, older people around the world see an 8% reduction in risk of premature death. And that's not a lot of legumes. It's barely 2 tablespoons worth. But there's actually a study that shows even a smaller swap from animal protein to plant protein has huge benefits on your health. One study that followed over 400,000 people showed that just a 3% swap of calories from animal protein to plant protein corresponded with a 10% decrease in death from any cause. So, no. You don't need to go 100% to start seeing the benefits of eating high fiber, plant protein rich food. But in general, the more whole plant-based foods you eat, the better. Personally, I'm not always eating whole plant-based foods, and I think that works the best for me. Now, I don't consume any animal products ever, but about 20% of my calories come from more processed foods. And at this point in my life, I love going out to eat at restaurants, trying new foods, going out to eat with friends. And although I don't have the science to back this up, my gut is telling me that since the overwhelming majority of my calories already come from high fiber foods, having the occasional treat every now and then isn't gonna have much meaningful impact, if any. And maybe it's cope, but I think the freedom and mental well-being it gives me is a different type of health that I really enjoy. I thoroughly enjoy the food I make at home and also really savor the occasional treat from time to time. And so if you want to get an idea of how I eat delicious high fiber foods and get a ton of plant protein easily, check out this video where I show you exactly what I eat on a daily basis.